Let's visit the small and picturesque town of Griffin, located in the state of Georgia, in the southeastern United States of America. Rightfully considered one of Georgia's oldest towns, Griffin was founded in 1840 and has since played a significant role in the state's history. All this influence of the past can be seen in its architecture and preserved monuments. The historical center of the town is imbued with the spirit of antiquity, where old brick buildings intertwine with modernity. Its rich history, stunning architecture, beautiful parks, and a variety of flavors make it a true gem of the South in the United States. Today, our story is full of intrigue and unexpected twists of fate, at the end of which each of you will ask yourself one question: where is the truth? Mary Katherine never thought that one careless act would lead to such terrible consequences. When the judge entered the courtroom, a special atmosphere of tension and anticipation appeared in the room. Everyone present focused and froze in anticipation of the verdict. The attorneys have done a tremendous amount of work, provided accurate arguments, and in case of an unexpected verdict, they already plan their performance and are ready for appeals and objections. The judge gives the floor to the jury, and they announce their verdict. At the end of a week-long trial and a 4-hour jury deliberation, Mary Katherine was found not guilty and acquitted on all charges. But let's return to this joyful note to the origins of the story and try to understand together what led the young woman to the defendant's bench and whether it could have been prevented. Stephen Andrew Freeman was born on January 1st, 1995, in Thomaston, Georgia, to Troy and Jennifer Freeman. He and his brother Blake grew up as happy, healthy children without any problems with their parents or society. Kind and responsive, Stephen had many friends. Everyone described him as an exceptionally calm and balanced person. Stephen grew up in Griffin, where he later attended Spalding High School and Gordon State College to complete his education. Mary Katherine Higdon was also raised in a respectable family. Somewhat carefree, impetuous, humorous, friendly, she was drawn to creativity. She often put on mini-plays and performed them in front of her family and neighbors. Mary and Stephen fell in love with each other in their senior years and have been inseparable since. The young couple had a lot of common interests. Both loved being in nature. They went hiking, fishing, and even hunting together. In 2012, Stephen Freeman updated his Facebook status to say he was in a relationship and regularly posted various photos with his beloved. Mary's family was fond of her boyfriend. Steve's parents, in turn, also accepted his girlfriend as their own daughter. After graduating from school, the young people moved in together. Stephen got a job as a plumber at Drainwright Gutters and Roofing Inc., and Mary Katherine worked as a teacher's assistant at St. George's Episcopal School. She also worked part-time as a salesperson at a gun store. By the summer of 2018, Stephen and Mary had been living together for 7 years, but had not gotten married. On August 1st, 2018, at 10:42 p.m., emergency services received an alarm call. The caller, 24-year-old Mary Katherine Higdon, screamed hysterically into the phone that she had accidentally shot her boyfriend. She reported grabbing a Glock 43 firearm, unaware that there was a bullet in the chamber. When paramedics and police arrived at Sunnybrook Drive, the girl was in a state of shock. She knelt in front of the motionless and bloodied body of the young man lying on the bed, crying incessantly, gasping and begging the doctors to help him. "I can't lose him. I can't lose him," she cried hoarsely. Law enforcement officers struggled to pull Mary Katherine away from the victim to examine him and provide first aid. 23-year-old Stephen Freeman, wounded in the chest just below the neck, was still breathing. He was immediately transported to Spalding Regional Hospital. Unfortunately, a few minutes before midnight, the young man's heart stopped. Not fully comprehending the tragedy that had occurred, and still in shock, Mary had to visit the police station to give her account of the events. She was called in for questioning, where the girl, still completely stunned, claimed that the shot was accidental. She explained that there had always been firearms in their home, and that Stephen would leave a pistol on the nightstand for self-defense before going to sleep. as their house was located outside the city. On that fateful evening, she merely wanted to hand Stephen the pistol, and it accidentally discharged. She had no idea the gun was loaded. Mary Katherine insisted that Stephen Freeman was the love of her life. She would never harm him, especially not intentionally. Examining the scene, investigators did not rule out the possibility that the act might have been premeditated, and they had substantial arguments to support this theory. There were signs of a struggle in the kitchen, with food and dishes scattered about. Detectives Adam Trammell and Chris Wilson found Mary's story improbable and continued the investigation, examining the evidence. Mary Katherine was called in for a second interrogation, where the investigators employed pressure tactics. They yelled at the suspect, expressed disbelief in her story, and demanded the truth. It worked. Mary Katherine confessed to shooting her boyfriend in anger. She shared that they had a severe argument, and she wanted to leave him. Having recorded the conversation, the investigators had an admission of guilt, indicating a case solved with a heartfelt confession. However, a serious technical problem arose, causing most of the recording to be lost, save for interference and indistinct noises. How this happened was unexplainable, as was the reason why no one thought to make a backup copy of this crucial piece of evidence. Further investigation revealed that the pistol could not have fired accidentally, as it required a trigger pull. Moreover, for the bullet to hit Stephen as it did, the pistol had to be pointed at the victim. Detectives also questioned Mary's behavior. Some suspected she was overacting, demonstrating her distress in an exaggerated manner. The detectives didn't stop for a moment, piecing together their version of the tragedy with new evidence and proof. Another critical fact cast doubt on the accident and Mary Katherine's words. Investigators learned that the girl worked at a gun store, where employees undergo thorough training on handling various firearms before starting work. This meant she undoubtedly knew how to safely hand over a pistol without causing harm. The picture of an accident didn't align with the new facts that the investigation uncovered. The woman changed her statement several times. Sometimes her hysterical state interrupted the interrogation, but she reiterated time and again that it was an accident. However, in another conversation, Mary Katherine let slip to the police that at Stephen's request she tossed the pistol to hand it to him, and the weapon accidentally discharged. This didn't match what she told investigators of the scene and during the first interrogation. Back then, Mary repeatedly stated that she was simply handing Stephen the pistol hand to hand, not tossing it, and that's when it accidentally fired below his neck. These changing statements worked against Mary Katherine, as she was caught lying, and every word was scrutinized for hidden intent, indicating guilt concealment. Mary was detained and remained in Spalding County Jail during the trial. She was charged with felony murder, malice murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime. Lieutenant Wilson vehemently contested Mary's claim of it being an accident and tried to prove her guilt in a deliberate and meticulously planned act. A new piece of evidence in this case was common cooking grease found on the slide of the pistol. The slide also had lubricant, suggesting that at some point the magazine must have been emptied. Bullets were loaded, inserted back into the pistol and placed on a shelf. In her defense, Mary Katherine told the police that she indeed was preparing dinner for Stephen that evening, the very dinner that was found scattered on the kitchen floor, explaining the presence of grease on the slide. Subsequent interrogations of the couple's relatives and friends did not provide the clarity expected in this case. Many friends claimed that this teenage love turned into a roller coaster ride for Stephen and Mary until the very end. Their relationship, at times nearly ending, then reigniting with new passion, became genuinely complicated in recent years. The lovers often quarreled over emerging disagreements. Mary turned every argument into a drama. She screamed at Stephen and attacked him, after which he often left the house to spend the night with friends, turning off his phone as Mary continued to call and text him. She tried to control his every move, driving Stephen to frustration. The guy shared with friends that Mary, during arguments and fights, pointed the pistol at him or herself, threatening to end her life or his. Stephen never reported this to the police, fearing Mary would be jailed. And this was not the only instance when Mary resorted to using a weapon. And there were plenty of weapons in their home. During an interrogation, Stephen's friend Thomas Skinner shared that 2 days before the tragedy, on July 30th, 2018, Stephen and Mary Katherine exchanged warm messages, wishing each other a good day. The next day, July 31st, Stephen told his mother that he would not return home to that devil and stayed the night at Thomas's place. On August 1st, 2018, when Stephen didn't come home to sleep, Mary sent him hundreds of messages begging him to return. That evening, she prepared dinner and waited for her beloved. From Stephen's mother, she learned he was at his friend Thomas's place and went to pick him up. She encountered them on the road and, rolling down the window, shouted that she was waiting for him at home for dinner. Stephen replied that he was coming home. The evening, instead of a reconciliatory dinner, ended in tragedy. The police believed the case was closed as a premeditated act, driven by Mary Katherine's anger, but her defense team revealed another side to the young couple's life, known to few. On June 17, 2019, almost a year after Stephen's death, his beloved Mary Katherine Higdon stood trial. Before the hearing, Mary Higdon was offered a plea deal for life imprisonment with the possibility of parole if she pled guilty. However, she refused the deal, insisting she could never harm Stephen because he was the love of her life. At the initial hearings, Mary Higdon defended herself vehemently. She repeatedly claimed it was an accident and that she loved Stephen Freeman. She also surprised many by accusing her boyfriend of abusive behavior towards her. She claimed he hit her twice and even forced himself on her. On the day of the tragedy, he allegedly attacked her, and she had to defend herself. It turned out the couple's relationship had been deteriorating over some time. Friends and relatives claimed Mary Higdon was furious because Stephen often ignored her messages and calls. She demanded attention and pursued him, especially insistently lately. Allegedly, on the night of the act when Stephen Freeman finally came home, he refused to eat the dinner Mary had prepared for him, which became the last straw for her. She couldn't hold back and fired at him. Prosecutor Kate Lenhard stated in court that there was physical evidence supporting that Mary Katherine shot Stephen in anger after he didn't come home for dinner and ignored her calls and text messages. As physical evidence, the grease found on the pistol and the sheet taken from the mattress where Stephen lay bleeding were presented. The sheet was shown as a key piece of evidence that Stephen was not attacking Mary but was sitting still in one spot. Forensic experts examined the bloodstains and determined that at the moment of the shot, Stephen was not moving or approaching Mary Katherine, but was calmly sitting on the bed. If he had been moving, blood would have been everywhere, not just in one corner of the sheet. This only confirmed that the accused's version was once again false. In court, faced directly with the possibility of life imprisonment and finally believing in what was happening, Mary Katherine took a risky decision to give truthful testimony in court. With tears in her eyes in front of the judge and numerous attendees, she once again portrayed Stephen Freeman as a harsh and controlling tyrant, and with certain evidence, she managed to do so. The defense stuck to the self-defense narrative, presenting the argument that erupted into a scandal between Mary and Stephen on the evening of the tragedy, where Mary fired at him in defense. Mary Katherine sorrowfully shared numerous stories from her life where Stephen had hurt her. She confessed he had repeatedly hit her face, shaken her, and threatened punishment for any minor misconduct or disobedience. Living with Stephen, I experienced all kinds of pressure imaginable: verbal insults, physical attacks, and even assault. He constantly controlled and manipulated me. He needed to know where I was, who I was with, what I was doing, how I was spending money, and even what I was eating. He drove me to despair with unreasonable jealousy. I never reported him to the police because I loved and feared him. The defense presented ample evidence to support her claims, revealing not just text messages taken from Mary's old phone, but also a correspondence that raised significant questions about who was the real tyrant and betrayer in this relationship. The text messages, dating back over a year and a half between her and Stephen, not only proved the boy's harshness, but also the girl's infidelity. Some message snippets showed Stephen indeed insulting Mary Katherine with harsh words and threatening her with repercussions upon his return from fishing. However, the reason for his anger was much more disdainful. Stephen's friends confirmed that at that moment, he was indeed very angry with his girlfriend for being unfaithful, which Mary denied. Mary Katherine shared that Stephen had forced himself on her twice, and she feared he would hurt her again on August 1st, 2018, leading her to act in self-defense. The defense called an expert and close relatives of Mary who could attest to the domestic violence. Mary's sister, Sarah Higdon, testified, affirmatively stating she saw bruises on Mary's arm 2 weeks before the shooting. She expressed regret for not photographing it and believing Mary's explanation that it happened accidentally. A tearful Mary Higdon explained to the jury that on that fateful night, she decided to break up with Stephen once and for all, telling him to leave the house. Stephen became angry and attacked her. In defense, she grabbed the pistol from the nightstand and accidentally fired. After Mary Katherine's emotional testimony, the prosecution and defense engaged in a fierce battle, with Stephen's former friends, who had been close to Mary for years, desperately trying to idealize their deceased friend. Thomas Skinner, Stephen's best friend, described the victim as a loyal and hard-working country boy, and Mary Katherine as an obsessive and possessive girlfriend who constantly controlled and stalked him. He claimed Mary Katherine and Stephen's relationship had become toxic over the last few years, with her threatening to end her life whenever Stephen tried to leave her, and once, after an argument, she pointed a pistol at her head in front of him. Another witness, Stephen's co-worker Alicia Varela, testified that Mary Katherine obsessively called Stephen throughout the day, even when he was at work. However, in Mary's supposedly truthful court testimony, where she framed the shooting as self-defense, she missed an important detail that prosecutor Kate Lenhard pointed out. Mary talked a lot about their interactions and how, after many years of perfect relations, they suddenly started to degrade and physically abuse each other. But she never mentioned the moment of supposed self-defense when she actually pulled the trigger. Prosecutor Kate Lenhard was not convinced by such an admission, noting that in cross-examination, Mary never once mentioned any harsh treatment by Stephen. She repeatedly asked Mary Katherine whether a woman, being safe at home, would go after her assailant late at night to bring him back home. The answer was not convincing, and the prosecutor continued her statement, embodying that dreadful scene of the accidental shooting. Kate Lenhard picked up the pistol and recreated the moment as she saw it. According to her version, Stephen came home. Then, after hearing Mary out, they argued, and he refused to have dinner. Mary, enraged, scattered the prepared food around the kitchen. Stephen, trying to avoid further conflict, went to the bedroom and sat on the bed. Likely he was waiting for her to calm down, but Mary, ready for confrontation, called out to him twice without receiving a response, walked into the bedroom, and shot him in the neck, on the left side, since he hadn't turned to face her. In her closing arguments, Kate Lenhard reminded the jury of the various stories and versions that kept changing at every police interrogation and court hearing. Mary Katherine Higdon spared no details in her emotional testimony about the alleged abuse from Stephen Freeman. But before handing the case over to the jury, Kate Lenhard desperately pleaded to consider this story not as a case of self-defense, but as a case of extreme manipulation. Despite the lost confession recording, the prosecution presented other evidence and counter-arguments. The forensic examination proved that Stephen Freeman was sitting on the bed at the moment of the shooting. Hence, he couldn't have been attacking Mary Higdon. Mary claimed they kept the gun in the house unloaded. Detectives suspected that the pistol was indeed loaded in advance on the evening of August 1st, 2018, when Mary was preparing a roast for Stephen. This was the only explanation for how grease marks not only got on part of the slide but also inside the pistol. Had Mary Katherine really loaded the pistol in advance? Colleagues, neighbors, family, friends, and acquaintances of Stephen Freeman unanimously testified that he was not prone to aggression. Prosecutors also pointed out that Mary Katherine Higdon changed details of her story at least 10 times since the first interrogation, attributing such changes to fear. Mary Katherine refused a plea deal, as she could have been facing the death penalty. The wait for the verdict felt like an eternity to her. After hearing all witnesses and the accused, the case was handed over to the jury. Just 10 minutes later, the jury was ready to announce their decision. However, 2 jurors out of 10 had doubts about some aspects of the prosecution's story. They were concerned that investigators, so eager to charge Mary Katherine with premeditated action, had not fully checked crucial facts. Questions were raised about the lack of a complete investigation into Stephen Freeman's phone, checking his text messages, and browsing history. The prosecution simply hadn't done this. Besides Mary's lies, no sufficient evidence was presented against her. The arguments presented by jurors Victor and Chris had an effect. The jury deliberated and returned a unanimous verdict, not guilty. A few hours later, Mary Katherine Higdon was free. After a lengthy deliberation, the 12 jurors concluded the following. On the first charge, malicious action, the defendant was found not guilty. On the second charge, serious action, the defendant was found not guilty. When the judge acquitted Mary Katherine Higdon on all charges, including intentional action, reckless action, assault with a deadly weapon, and carrying a weapon during the commission of a crime, many people in the courtroom were shocked. Watching the woman who took her son's life walk out of the courtroom, Jennifer Freeman could barely contain her anger towards the jurors. Everyone who supported Stephen's family was also stunned by such a verdict. After the trial ended in her favor, Mary Katherine returned home to be with her family in Griffin. Since then, she has stayed out of the limelight and is almost absent from social media, likely to avoid undue attention from the media and the public. Her Instagram profile is private, and no further details about her current whereabouts are known. It's assumed that Mary Katherine has moved on from her harrowing past to live a quiet and unnoticeable life. Stephen Freeman's mother dedicated a farewell post to her son on social media. Stephen lived a life filled with love, joy, compassion, and loyalty. Everyone was his friend, and those who enjoyed hunting and fishing with him were his closest. He had a heart of gold and a charming southern smile. Stephen showed his love for you by making you feel like you were the only person in the world, making you laugh until your stomach hurt, always smiling broadly, hugging you, and never leaving your side. These 3 simple words, "I love you," have always inspired me. So who really pulled the trigger in this story? That's a question you must answer for yourself, as all the answers in this story are evident. By analyzing and presenting the situation, it's up to everyone to decide whether Mary Katherine is guilty or if it was a tragic accident that cost a young man his life. How much do you agree with the 2 jurors who changed the course of a young woman's life, giving her a second chance? Mary Katherine likely lives a quiet life away from the spotlight now that she has managed to leave her terrible past behind. Australia is one of the most magical places on Earth. It's the smallest continent, a land of eternal summer with unique flora and fauna. Its very location is unique. Australia is the only country in the world that occupies an entire continent. Many people dream of this enchanting country, isolated from the rest of the world, as a place to chase their dreams. But in our story, one grand dream was not meant to come true. On March 5th, 2021, Jasmine Kaur finished her work shift and headed to the car park. A young man approached her and called her aside. Jasmine knew him, so she followed without fear. The next moment, he grabbed her by the neck with his strong hand and forcefully placed her in a nearby car. Jasmine resisted. She tried to scream and asked to be let go, but the choking pressure on her neck cut off her oxygen. She went limp, and the abductor placed her in the car. He hurriedly got behind the wheel and drove away. 18-year-old Jasmine came to Australia from India in pursuit of her dream. After her father's tragic death, she dreamed of becoming a nurse to help people. She wanted to obtain a quality medical education. With her mother's blessing, she joyfully accepted her aunt and uncle's offer to move to Australia. Thus, she settled in Adelaide with her close relatives and successfully enrolled in university. Studying was hard due to the heavy workload, but Jasmine was persistent and goal-oriented, never straying from her dream. She never missed a lecture, read mountains of textbooks, and helped her classmates with notes. Thanks to her perseverance, she earned the respect of her professors and became a role model for her peers. Jasmine Kaur's relentless determination not only allowed her to study, but also to find a job to gain practical experience. 2 years into her studies, Jasmine Kaur landed a student nurse position at the Southern Cross Homes Hospital in Plympton North, a suburb of Adelaide. At a university social event, Jasmine met Tarakjot Singh. The two quickly struck up a friendship. Both being from India, they had a lot in common to talk about. Tarakjot Singh came from an ordinary Indian family. After finishing school with flying colors, he aimed for a better education and moved to Australia to pursue a bachelor's degree in information technology. A kind and empathetic young man, he studied hard and worked to afford a comfortable living in the bustling city. The young people spent a lot of time together, hanging out at work and catching up at cafes between university lectures. Over time, their friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship. By April 2020, the young couple was no longer hiding their relationship and started planning a future together. Jasmine was smitten with Tarakjot's attention and care. He continuously expressed his devotion and love. Initially, it seemed like he was just very caring, but gradually his attentiveness became more intrusive. Tarakjot started inquiring about Jasmine's every move, justifying it by saying he was concerned for her well-being. Secretly, he began checking whom she was interacting with on social media, and then started demanding reports on her every step. Jasmine felt that Tarakjot's behavior had crossed all boundaries, but he managed to convince her every time that his total control was purely out of love and care. He would apologize and promise not to invade her personal space without reason, but these were just empty promises. Over time, Jasmine felt increasingly suffocated in her relationship with Tarakjot. He strongly opposed her interactions with family and friends. This isolation deeply hurt her, leading Jasmine to make a crucial decision to end the relationship and free herself from the pressure. With her family's support, Jasmine informed Tarakjot that she was ending their relationship. He reacted with fury, screaming, cursing, and threatening retribution against her family. Jasmine was emotionally drained. She took leave and went to stay with her mother in India. But even there, Tarakjot did not leave her alone. From afar, he used emotional blackmail, threatening to end his life. Tarakjot took drastic measures to capture his ex-girlfriend's attention. At one point, he attempted to end his life by consuming several packs of sleeping pills, recording the act and sending the video to Jasmine, hoping to elicit pity and compassion. However, his plan backfired, and instead of winning her back, he ended up in the hospital under medical care. After receiving the necessary therapy, Tarakjot returned to his job and studies. It appeared he had accepted the breakup with Jasmine and started a new life without her. But on March 6, 2021, Jasmine Kaur did not show up for work. As evening fell and darkness enveloped the streets, a car swiftly made its way through the city, adeptly avoiding surveillance cameras. After an hour's drive, the car came to a stop. The young man exited and helped the girl out. She was weak from the prolonged lack of oxygen. With cold efficiency, he retrieved tape and a cable from the trunk. Without a word, and with brute cruelty, he sealed her mouth and eyes with the tape, causing her eyelashes to stick together and pulling tightly on the delicate skin of her face. Then, the man tied her hands behind her back. She writhed in fear. Silence. There was nowhere to run. He pushed her, and when she fell, he tied her legs with the same cable. The victim moaned and squirmed on the dusty road. Her long, dark hair tangled, and her clothes became dirty. After binding her legs, he grabbed her hair and with a swift slash cut across her throat. The victim went silent. He placed the knife in a bag and carelessly lifted the immobilized girl off the ground into the trunk. Closing the lid, he lit a cigarette. He took a few puffs before getting back into the car to continue his drive. He drove through the evening and all night, Only in the early morning did his car stop at Death's Peak. The man dug a shallow grave, removed the victim from the trunk, and laid her in the ground. Thus, the young woman was buried alive by her abductor. But she was still alive. Her eyes didn't see the horror of her situation. Lying in the cold earth, trying to breathe, her nostrils filled with fine sand, the weight of the soil pressing down on her, she was unable to move. Fear and the realization of complete helplessness took over her mind. She could only moan, briefly, then she fell asleep, forever. So easily and simply, one person decided they had the right to determine another's fate. But evil must and will be punished. On March 6, 2021, Jasmine Cower did not show up for work at the Southern Cross Care elderly home in North Plimpton, where she worked as a nurse without any prior warning. Her supervisor contacted her family. On the same day, she was declared missing. A search began. Surveillance footage from that evening was reviewed, but there was nothing that could aid the investigation in finding Jasmine Cower. The last time the young nursing student was seen was leaving her job at Southern Cross Homes in Plimpton North around 10 p.m. on March 5th. Tarakjot Singh quickly became the prime suspect with a motive, especially since Jasmine had filed a harassment complaint against him with the police just weeks before her disappearance. When first questioned by police on March 6th, Singh claimed he couldn't remember the last time he saw Jasmine Kaur and insisted he was at home on the night of her death. The following day, Singh informed the officers that Jasmine had taken her own life and that he had buried her in the Flinders Ranges. He led the police to the burial site, where they discovered Jasmine's shoes, glasses, and work ID badge in a trash bin, along with zip ties. She was exhumed 2 days after Tarakjot Singh was interrogated by the police at Morialta Creek, 40 kilometers north of Hawker, approximately 100 meters from the road and nearly a 5-hour drive from the location he allegedly took her. Tarakjot Singh was arrested and held in custody pending trial. Investigators determined that in the days leading up to her disappearance, Tarakjot Singh had meticulously prepared for the abduction and death of the young woman. It was found that on the day of the kidnapping, Singh had purchased zip ties, tape, and rope from a hardware store. Searches conducted at the residence where Tarakjot lived uncovered several SIM cards and phones, proving that he had carefully planned the abduction, even going as far as changing his SIM card to fabricate an alibi. On the night of the abduction, Singh switched cars with his apartment neighbor and asked him to cover his shift, then headed to the elderly home where Jasmine was working that day. Initially, Singh was charged with failing to report a death to the coroner before the charge was upgraded to homicide. Following the investigation, 21-year-old Tarakjot Singh from Coralta Park was charged with the homicide of 21-year-old Jasmine Kaur after her body was found buried at Morialta Creek. Singh first appeared via video link before the Port Augusta Magistrates Court on March 9th, where Judge Gregory Fisher ordered the accused's name and face to be withheld for 30 days. In July 2021, hearings in the Jasmine Court case began under Judge Adam Kimber in the Supreme Court. It emerged during the hearings that Singh was in Australia on a student visa and had spent time in a short-term psychiatric ward that year. Prosecutors told the Supreme Court that 21-year-old Jasmine Kaur was assassinated a month after she reported her ex-partner Tarakjot Singh for stalking her. Singh pleaded guilty to the of Jasmine Kaur in March 2021, and the details of his crime were outlined during the sentencing. Prosecutor Carmen Mateo stated that Jasmine Kaur endured absolute terror after Singh abducted her from her workplace in Adelaide on March 5, 2021. The court heard Jasmine Kaur suffered an extraordinary level of cruelty after her former boyfriend kidnapped her, bound her with tape and zip ties, and buried her alive with her eyes bound and conscious at Death's Peak, near Hawker in the Flinders Ranges. Evidence provided by the pathologist who conducted Jasmine's autopsy indicated that Singh made superficial cuts to her throat, but these did not cause her death. An autopsy report presented showed Jasmine Kaur died on March 6, 2021, several hours after being buried. Horrific details emerged during the sentencing at the Supreme Court. Prosecutor Carmen Mateo stated she had to be acutely aware of her hopeless situation, and she must have consciously suffered from what can only be described as absolute terror. Mateo also mentioned that the act was inefficient, and Jasmine Kaur was made to suffer. It is unknown when her throat was cut, unknown when and how she ended up in that grave or was placed there, and unknown when she was dug out, other than the accusation suggests that it must have happened while she was still alive and being prepared for burial. During the initial investigation into Jasmine Tower's death, Tarak Jot denied any wrongdoing, continuously asserting that she took her own life. However, Judge Adam Kimber stated that Singh prepared a series of calculated steps over a certain period of time to commit the crime. Prosecutor Carmen Mateo informed the court that Miss Kaur had filed a police report claiming that Tarakjot Singh was stalking her on February 9th, about a month before she was assassinated. She said that Singh began cold and clinical planning of Miss Kaur's death after their relationship ended. The manner in which Jasmine Kaur was murdered indeed involved an extraordinary level of cruelty, she added. Martin Anders, the attorney representing Singh's interests, stated that 2 months before the tragic incident, the Singh and Kaur families had a meeting that resulted in a negative decision regarding the continuation of their relationship. He also mentioned that Singh's reasoning was seriously impaired following the end of their relationship. This is not someone who was really well-grounded in terms of understanding what desires were at play, how these issues evolved, and how he might have properly reasoned in the circumstances he faced. The lawyer explained, he took actions that destroyed not only her life, but his own. Martin Anders commented on Singh's deteriorating mental health and is experiencing hallucinations following Jasmine Kaur's demise. However, a psychiatric evaluation concluded that Tarakjot Singh was fully sane at the time, and he was charged with assassination. During the sentencing, the court heard about several messages Singh wrote, but never sent to Jasmine in the days leading up to her death. These messages contained statements such as, "You're bad luck that I'm still alive, just wait and see. Every one of them will get an answer, and deep inside what I feel but can't overcome." The prosecution informed the court that Singh downloaded a map of surveillance cameras across Adelaide the day before abducting Jasmine. Miss Mateo said that surveillance footage showed Singh purchasing zip ties from a hardware store on the afternoon of the abduction. She also mentioned that Singh removed the SIM card from his phone, placed it in another device, and left it at his home to engage cell towers that would create the impression he was at or near his home. He punished her, a defenseless, innocent girl, for rejecting him, she said. According to the prosecution, he forced her into the car, kept her on the back seat or in the trunk, took her a significant distance, ended her life, buried her, and disposed of any evidence that could implicate him in this crime. Judge Kimber sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. His lawyer described the act as a crime of passion and appealed for a more lenient sentence, but the request was denied. Relatives of Jasmine, who was buried alive, were present during the sentencing. In her statement, Jasmine's mother welcomed the verdict. "Today I don't feel happy. I wish I wasn't making this statement and that Jasmine was still here with me," she said. Rashpal Kaur told the court she is haunted by the thought of what her daughter Jasmine Kaur experienced in her final moments. "I go through the terrible sequence of events, wondering when she realized she was in mortal danger," the statement read. "There was no one to save her. She spent her last hour on this earth with the worst of humanity. Jasmine is gone, and I am devastated with grief. She was a precious little girl." Rashpal Kaur stated that Singh was obsessed with Jasmine, who had rejected him 100 times. "She lost her life because Tarakjot wanted to force her into marriage and force her into a relationship with him," she said. Mrs. Kaur stated she would never forgive Singh for what he had done. "Justice has prevailed, and I cannot express our relief. We welcome the sentence, but what I can say is that my family and I have already begun serving a life sentence. and we will have to spend the rest of our lives without Jasmine. Jasmine's employer and those she cared for described her as a beautiful soul who was kind, sweet, and attentive. Thus, 21-year-old Indian student Tarakjot Singh, who abducted his former girlfriend, 21-year-old Jasmine Kaur, from a South Australian nursing home where she worked in North Plympton, Adelaide, in March 2021, was sentenced to life in prison for a term of no less than 23 years without the possibility of parole. He bound her with tape and zip ties and then buried her while she was still conscious at Death's Peak near Hawker in the Flinders Ranges. Singh, who was 20 at the time, initially pleaded not guilty to the crime against Miss Kaur, but changed his plea a month before the trial in the Supreme Court. Judge Adam Kimber ordered Singh to serve a sentence of 22 years and 10 months without the possibility of parole, just slightly more than the mandatory minimum term for ending someone's life in South Australia, which is 20 years. While rendering the verdict, Judge Adam Kimber described the crime as horrific and extremely heartless, stating he was at a loss for words to describe the terror of Miss Jasmine Kaur's final moments. The terror she must have felt when she was abducted, tied up, and held in the car during the long drive to Morallen Creek is hard to fathom, said Judge Kimber. I cannot describe the horror that Miss Kaur must have felt when she realized that you were burying her alive. The court heard that Singh did not reveal details about how he abducted Miss Kaur from her workplace or what he did with her in the subsequent hours. However, Judge Kimber stated there was clear evidence that she suffered greatly and was forced to endure a long car ride while bound and gagged. After the sentence was announced, Judge Adam Kimber said it was clear that the crime was premeditated and that Singh took steps to conceal his horrific actions. The enormity of what you did must have been clear to you, said the judge. There was time to reflect. There was time to step back from the plan. Yet you proceeded and ended Miss Kaur's life. Judge Adam Kimber told Singh that he was beyond any reasonable doubt satisfied that the criminal was only concerned about himself. You ended Miss Kaur's life to punish her for her unwillingness to maintain a relationship with you and for turning to the police, he stated. The police had warned Singh about stalking in early February 2021, less than a month before the crime. During the sentencing, the court heard that Singh wrote several messages to Miss Kaur in the days before her death, which were never sent. At the trial, a statement Jasmine Kaur wrote to the police just 5 weeks before her death was read, detailing how her overly possessive perpetrator persistently followed her in the street and at her workplace. In the statement, signed January 28, 2021, Miss Kaur disclosed that she had been in a controlling relationship with Singh for about 9 months. He was overly possessive and wanted to control who I spent time with, the document released by the Supreme Court stated. Miss Kaur told the police that she ended the relationship on January 4, 2021, but Singh took it badly. He stated that I had to be with him, or else he would try to end his own life, she said. During their relationship, she mentioned Singh would sometimes get upset if she planned to go out with friends, calling her and demanding she come home. Singh, a citizen of India who came to Australia to study information technology at a university and who also worked at a nursing home, is likely to be deported once he is released from prison. Tarakjot Singh will be about 40 years old when he becomes eligible to apply for parole in January 2044. Jasmine Kaur became yet another victim of terror from a man, the attentive, sensitive, and kind. Tarakjot Singh, whom she loved and trusted, turned out to be a wolf in sheep's clothing, and his pathological jealousy and emotional instability cost her her life. A person who truly loves can never harm their beloved. They would take any blow upon themselves. In the case of Tarakjot, there's no right answer. Some may see in this story an insult, some incompetence, and others might consider the guy a psychopath. But looking at Jasmine's story, one can learn, at the cost of her mistakes, to prevent themselves and their loved ones from making similar ones in the future. Jasmine Kaur's case is a heart-wrenching story of toxic obsession and crime that shook the Australian backcountry, following the disastrous end triggered by the boyfriend's reprehensible behavior. The Amato family case, when obsession turns a quiet individual into a monster. Like many serious addictions, which can be likened to severe illnesses with psychological, biological, or social underpinnings, this case involves a destructive habit, whether it's an urge for alcohol, prohibited substances, or gambling, or an obsessive need for a particular activity or interaction with a certain person or group. It's tragic when addiction affects not just the individual, but also their loved ones who strive earnestly to help. The once prosperous and happy Amato family faced such a dilemma head-on. As all family members were healthcare professionals, they believed they could handle the situation without external help. By the time they realized the severity of the situation, it was regrettably too late. This isn't a story of mere addiction, but of a young man's extreme obsession with a woman he had never personally met. Compounded by his addiction to forbidden substances and a pathological inclination towards theft, the situation spiraled into a horrifying outcome. Let's delve into this case to understand if there was a chance to alter the course of events and prevent the tragedy. The family home bloodshed. On January 25, 2019, a concerned man contacted the Seminole County Police in Florida. He reported that his close friend and colleague, Cody Amato, a nurse, unexpectedly didn't show up for his shift at the hospital, which was highly unusual for him. The day before, Cody had left work about 15 minutes early due to some urgent family issues at home, departing so hastily he even forgot to collect his pay for the day. Attempts to reach the 31-year-old Cody by phone were unsuccessful. He simply wasn't answering. His girlfriend, with whom he had been living recently, stated that Cody went to his parents' house the previous day at his father's request, but never returned to her place, and she too couldn't reach him. All these signs triggered alarming thoughts, prompting the dispatch of police officers to the provided address. The Amato family home, located in a suburb of Orlando, boasted a large adjoining area with a stable and a horse-walking area. Cody's car was parked in the driveway, and lights were on in several rooms of the house. At first glance, everything seemed normal. No signs of forced entry or struggle, with the doors and windows intact. When the sheriff's deputy knocked, there was no response, and calls to the landline also went unanswered. The police then sought permission to enter, and upon approval, cautiously unlocked the back door using a knife to slide the bolt. Inside, an eerie silence pervaded, though the lit room suggested someone must be present. Indeed, the homeowners were there. The officers first discovered the lifeless body of 59-year-old family patriarch, Chad Amato, lying on the kitchen floor in a pool of his own blood, with 2 close-range gunshot wounds to his chest. Next, at the staircase opposite the main entrance, lay Cody, curled up and also deceased in a massive pool of blood. Lastly, they found 61-year-old Margaret Amato sitting at her computer in the home office. At first glance, she seemed to be napping with her head resting on her arm, if not for the blood splatters on the monitor and a large, spreading stain beneath her head. The murder weapon, an IUI Jericho 941 pistol found next to Cody's body, was later determined by forensic experts to have his fingerprints. With no signs of break-in or external presence and nothing missing from the house, it initially appeared that Cody, possibly after a family dispute, had ended their lives and then shot himself in the chest. However, smeared blood on the front door indicated it was locked by someone leaving the house after the incident, suggesting the perpetrator wasn't among the deceased family members. Regarding the likely suspect, there were little doubts. Those familiar or connected with the Amato family pointed to their youngest son, 30-year-old Grant, who had been missing since that evening. His car, a white Honda, along with some personal items including a laptop from Grant's room, were gone, implying that the owner had taken them. Grant was declared a person of interest, and a search was initiated for his whereabouts. What's known about the Amato family? Margaret Ann Amato, née Wade, and Chad Robert Amato tied the knot in the mid-1980s. Margaret, 2 years senior to Chad, was already raising a 3-year-old son, Jason, from a previous marriage. Chad wasn't deterred by her having a child. Instead, he was ready to raise Jason as his own. In 1988, the couple welcomed their first child together, a son named Cody, followed by the birth of their youngest son, Grant Tiernan Amato, on May 20, 1989. From childhood, the brothers shared a close bond. Raised in a well-off family, they hardly ever faced denials. However, to earn certain privileges, they had to adhere to family rules, excel in school, help with household chores, and exhibit good behavior. They strived to be the pride and support of their parents. Both parents held advanced degrees in healthcare. Margaret was a senior operational manager in a prestigious private clinic, while Chad, initially a clinical pharmacist, later shifted to software specialization. The family was quite affluent, living in a spacious suburban home with their own stable, breeding thoroughbred racehorses as a hobby. After finishing high school at 18, Jason left home, pursued university education, and started his own life. He got married, settled a family, and moved to another state, maintaining a close relationship with his parents and younger brothers. Cody and Grant were almost inseparable, attending the same school, joining the same sports team, and regularly visiting the shooting range with their father on weekends. The Amatos had an impressive firearm collection, including rare pieces, accessible only to the family patriarch for safety reasons. The youngest son, Grant, was the youngest of 3 sons in the family, and as often happens, he received the lion's share of everyone's attention and adoration. As a child, he was frail and sickly, so everyone tried to surround him with love and care. He grew up to be a modest and very shy boy, finding it hard to connect with peers, making his brothers his only friends. Grant became particularly close to Cody after their eldest brother, Jason, grew up and left home. After high school, the brothers pursued medical degrees together, eventually becoming anesthesiologists. While Cody excelled in his studies, becoming the top student in his class, Grant barely made it through with low grades. Nevertheless, both managed to land jobs in their field at a hospital. Cody earned a reputation as a reliable professional, but Grant frequently got into trouble, making errors and needing his work double-checked. In the summer of 2018, Grant's career at the hospital ended scandalously. He was caught stealing strictly controlled sedatives, which caused euphoria and hallucinations, and were used rarely for anesthesia. The discovery led to police involvement, and Grant was arrested. During interrogation, he admitted to the theft, claiming he administered the drugs to patients who, in his opinion, were under-medicated. Many believed Grant was using or selling the drugs illegally, though there was no direct evidence. He was immediately suspended and later fired. His criminal case for theft was eventually dismissed, reportedly due to his parents' intervention. Unemployed and internet-dependent. After losing his job, the 29-year-old man, already a loner, became even more withdrawn. He spent weeks indoors, glued to his computer, mostly browsing adult websites. Grant never had a girlfriend and struggled with social interactions with women, leaving him feeling inadequate. He indulged in viewing adult content and frequently interacted with webcam models on specialized platforms, trying to fill the void of a non-existent personal life. This private interaction, of course, came at a cost. Grant easily accessed funds from his parents' and older brother's accounts for these activities. This obsession quickly spiraled into an addiction, compounded by regular alcohol consumption. But Grant seemed content with this lifestyle, living off his family, spending their money without contributing anything in return. Eventually, his father issued an ultimatum: find a job soon, or he'd have to leave home and lose any financial support from the family. Grant promised his father to resolve the issue but had no real intention of seeking employment. He claimed he would become a streamer, earning by broadcasting video games. His parents, seeing this as better than nothing, agreed to set up a streaming station for him. Once everything was in place, Grant pretended to be streaming, asking for privacy, but in reality he was locked in his room, indulging in his favorite pastime, visiting adult-only websites. Trip to Japan. In August 2018, when Cody took a vacation from work, he decided to embark on a journey across the globe for a change of scenery. Dreaming of visiting Japan, he invited his younger brother Grant and his best friend Jeremy. While Cody and Jeremy had their own funds for the trip, earned independently, Grant's vacation was financed by their parents. However, rather than giving the money directly to Grant, they entrusted it to Cody, the more responsible of the two. The trip lasted nearly 2 weeks, and throughout it, Grant seemed disengaged. He showed little interest in tours or landmarks, constantly fixated on his smartphone's screen. He often stayed back at the hotel, using his brother's laptop. On a day the group went to Lake Kawaguchi near Mount Fuji, Jeremy accidentally left his credit card in their hotel room. Seizing the opportunity, Grant hacked into Jeremy's account and withdrew thousands of dollars, spending it all on private sessions with his favorite webcam model. Jeremy discovered the theft later, but initially suspected fraud. He couldn't pinpoint the culprit and continued to investigate the incident after returning home, unaware that Grant was responsible. Sylvia Venceslavova, Sylvie. Now let's delve into the most intriguing part, the identity of the mysterious webcam model who became an obsession for Grant. On a site where Grant paid for private online interactions with various women, he met the stunning Sylvia Venceslavova from Bulgaria, known as Sylvie. She captivated him with her striking looks, confidence, charisma, and passion. Sylvie made Grant feel special, loved, desired, and unique. He began to believe that her feelings for him were genuine, and they could have a real relationship. Grant was convinced they were in a relationship, and he needed to win over this fiery brunette from all her other admirers. He spent hours and thousands of dollars daily to ensure she had no time for other men. Grant also showered her with gifts like expensive lingerie and jewelry, which she would wear during their video chats. Desperate to impress Sylvie, Grant constantly fabricated stories, losing touch with reality. He claimed to live alone in a large house, own a successful business, and could afford to lavish her with money. He backed up his claims with money transfers, initially sending a couple of $1,000s, then $10,000 and even $100,000 as a birthday gift. Naturally, Grant's lavish spending didn't go unnoticed by his parents, as he was using their accounts. At first, he explained it as investments in his own online project to attract an audience, but Chad and Margaret quickly realized their son was lying. Scandal, escape, and rehab clinic. A serious family dispute erupted at home. The patriarch demanded that the youngest son immediately pack his things and leave, but his mother and Cody intervened on Grant's behalf. The family understood that Grant was suffering from severe internet addiction. However, they were baffled about how he had spent nearly $200,000 from their accounts. A thorough search in his room uncovered vials of potent substances. Grant explained he used them to keep from going insane. The parents announced they would cut off his access to their accounts and intended to send him for mandatory treatment for drug and internet addiction. In response, Grant declared he was tired of everything and ready to end his life. He then dashed out of the house, jumped into his car, and sped away at high speed in an unknown direction. Later, it was discovered that Grant went to his aunt and uncle's house, crashed through their fence, and hit the garage wall. Aware of the turmoil in the Amato family, his relatives sympathized with him and offered him a place to stay until things settled. He readily agreed, but robbed his kind-hearted relatives the next day, stealing thousands of dollars from their accounts to pay for interactions with Sylvie. When Grant's aunt informed his parents, they asked her not to call the police, promising to resolve the situation and return the stolen money. That same day, Chad personally went to their house and took Grant, who urgently needed intervention. Chad, Margaret, and Cody realized that reasoning with him was futile, and if he left home, he would likely commit theft again. They then presented Grant with a different ultimatum. Either he would go to a rehabilitation clinic for treatment of his addictions or face jail time for theft. Reluctantly, Grant agreed to enter the clinic, where he would spend 2 months away from any temptations. He was admitted to the medical institution at the end of December 2018. The grown man's little secret. While Grant was in treatment, his parents checked his computer and discovered where their son was spending thousands of dollars daily from their family accounts. They found the profile of Sylvie, the woman who had deeply affected their son, reviewed their correspondence, and found hundreds of recordings of their intimate private online interactions that Grant treasured and often revisited. The Amatos decided to inform Sylvie that her admirer, who had showered her with money and gifts, was not a businessman, but an ordinary unemployed man with drug and internet addictions. They also pointed out that the funds Grant transferred to her were stolen, potentially subjecting him to criminal charges. However, Sylvie remained indifferent, as for her, It was just a job, and she had no intention of returning the money. The unexpected return. On January 5, 2019, just a couple of weeks into his treatment, Grant made an abrupt return home, having completed less than a quarter of the necessary rehabilitation program. He had fled the clinic, where he was noted for his complete lack of compliance. Grant tearfully vowed to turn his life around and find employment, but threatened to end his life if forced to return to the rehab center. His parents agreed, but laid down strict rules. Grant was barred from using the computer, had to follow a strict schedule, and all his earnings were closely monitored. Additionally, he was given a part-time job at a local grocery warehouse. For about 3 weeks, Grant seemed to comply, leading his parents to believe he had matured and left his addictions behind. However, everything changed on Thursday, January 24, 2019, when Grant persuaded his mother to let him use the laptop briefly to check his email and post his resume online, hoping to find a more ambitious job than his current warehouse position. Margaret trusted her son and allowed him to use the laptop, making a fatal mistake. Naturally, Grant first tried to contact Sylvie, only to discover that his parents had already written to her, exposing the truth about him. He saw this as a betrayal. Moreover, his parents had humiliated him in front of the only woman he loved, and they had to pay for that. The brutal takedown of family. Remember the previously mentioned home gun collection? Chad had kept it in a special large safe, the key to which he trusted no one. However, Grant knew about another gun stored in his parents' bedroom, always kept loaded by his father, and it was this gun he decided to use. His mother was sitting at the computer in the home office when her youngest son quietly approached her from behind and shot her in the back of the head. The position of her body suggested she didn't even have time to turn around or understand what was happening. Next was his father, who was about to return home from work. As soon as Chad entered the kitchen, he was confronted face-to-face with Grant and immediately received 2 bullets to the chest. Grant tensely contemplated his next move, devising an even more monstrous plan. He decided to frame his own brother Cody, the only person who had always stood up for him, helped him, and been his best friend. By then, Cody had moved out of the family home and was living separately with his girlfriend. To lure Cody home, Grant used his now-deceased father's phone to send several messages asking him to come home immediately because something terrible had happened. He didn't elaborate, confident that this information would be enough to make his brother rush home from work. Grant's calculation was correct, and Cody indeed arrived, even leaving work early. Entering the house, he only made it to the bottom of the staircase leading to the second floor before being shot and collapsing. Cody didn't die instantly. He had time to realize the horror of the situation, but was powerless to change it. After eliminating his family, Grant coldly wiped his fingerprints off the pistol, placed the weapon in his brother's hand to leave his prints, and then left it next to the body, making it look as if Cody had shot their parents and then himself. The rest of the evening, the killer calmly packed his things, downloaded video files of his communications with Sylvie from the computer, and even texted the girl. Having finished his affairs, he loaded his essentials into the car and drove away. Arrest and trial. It took the police just over a day to track down and arrest Grant, who was hiding in a small roadside motel in Orange County. He wasn't surprised, more disappointed that he was found so quickly, but he vehemently denied any guilt. During his interrogation at the station, he spun unbelievable tales about his father's incredible cruelty, alleging mistreatment towards him, his mother, and brother. Grant also spoke of his father's attempts to separate him from his beloved girlfriend Sylvie, whom he claimed to share true and pure love with. Regarding the events at their family home on the evening of January 24, 2019, his account was confusing and inconsistent. He suggested that his father and brother had a fight, Cody grabbed a gun, and ended Chad's life, with Margaret being an accidental victim. Grant claimed he could only guess the chronology of these horrific events, as he wasn't a witness himself, stating he spent the night in his car with his belongings after his father kicked him out. In the morning, he said he simply drove away, unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded at home. His story sounded disjointed and implausible, and the evidence indirectly pointed to him as the sole perpetrator. As a result, Grant was arrested as the primary suspect in the triple homicide of his family members. He was held on a $750,000 bond, which he was unable to post, and thus remained in custody awaiting trial. The trial commenced on July 15, 2019. Notably, almost all witnesses who testified in court spoke against Grant, including his older brother Jason, relatives, and Cody's friend Jeremy, whom Grant had stolen money from during their trip to Japan. Those who knew the defendant personally described him as prone to various addictions, a pathological thief, and a liar. The main piece of evidence against Grant was a significant bank transfer from Chad's account to his younger sons. This transaction occurred late at night when all family members were already deceased. To confirm the transaction, the defendant had used his deceased father's finger for identification. The prosecution pushed for the death penalty, while his defense argued that Grant was ill and needed treatment. The final verdict was delivered on August 12, 2019. The court found 30-year-old Grant Amato guilty of first-degree triple homicide and sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.